You're watching Business Access TV.
Business Access.
Business Access.
Business Access.
Business Access.
You are watching Business Access TV.
Business Access TV.
Serious about business.
Serious about business.
Business Access TV is here at the JSE Core Competencies to Excel as a Corporate Secretary. I'm your host, Andrew Laidley. Please stay with us.
I wish to welcome you to yet another workshop, Corporate Secretaries Workshop. As you know, we have these workshops each year, and the reason we continue to do so is that we feel that we should be at the cutting edge of any changes that is occurring in whether locally or globally. We feel that the workshops have been beneficial to us so far, and that with each day when we have these changes, we should continue to look at educating the persons in this industry. This morning and this workshop is very special, as we will be hosting, it is being hosted in association with the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators. And as we move towards introducing the Corporate Governance Index, I think today is especially important so that we can see how this can be incorporated into what we do as company secretaries and others within the industry. It is especially important that we look at this to see how our companies will score higher in terms of corporate governance. Today is intended to be a very good workshop based on the persons who will be presenting. So I invite you to stay tuned, ask the relevant questions, and ensure that when we leave here, we can implement what we have learned.
The Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators is an institution that certifies secretaries, chartered secretaries, and I believe it is the only institution in the world that does that. It's incorporated by Royal Charter and has its base in England, London, England. And our dear leader, Simon Osborne, is the CEO of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries. In Jamaica, we have the Association of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, which is a branch of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries. Today, we are very happy to be hosting this seminar with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and I hope that what we present today, you might find something to take away from it, because we are going to try to give you something practical that you can use in your everyday life.
Governance has to suit each jurisdiction. One size cannot fit all. Even within a peer group of companies engaged in similar activities, similar business, because the dynamic is going to be different, because the business conditions are going to be different, the governance framework will necessarily be different. And as you comply or explain, also within a peer group of companies doing the same, broadly the same activity, you will find that they comply in different ways. And that's the beauty of a code of principles. So what do we mean by governance? The Cadbury definition, the process by which an organization is directed or controlled. The other perceived virtue of corporate governance on the part of politicians and policymakers is that it leads to increased opportunities and choice for all. Now that's one of those wonderful glib expressions that rolls off the tongue of a politician. And it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But what on earth does it mean? As a political aspiration, it's great. Opportunities and choice for all. Hurrah, yeah, we'll all vote for that. But can we really expect corporate governance to deliver such an overtly political objective? I'll leave that one hanging in the air. Poor old Bob Diamond, he gets a bit of a caning over this one. He did actually say that corporate governance is not how you behave when you think no one is watching. He did actually say that. But I think it's a good reminder that, there's no point trying to do one thing, say one thing and do another. That sort of hypocrisy, you'll get found out eventually. The truth will always out. Governance is concerned with the exercise of power, the role of directors, the responsibilities of shareholders, and how those are balanced. And it also deals with disclosure, transparency, accountability, internal control, and making sure you avoid that concentration of power in too few hands. Hence the desire, it's now become standard, certainly in the UK. America's finding it harder, but actually separating the roles of chairman and chief executive so that you achieve a more constructive tension at the top levels in the C-suite. What are some of the governance hot topics? Well, I don't know what it's like here, but remuneration in the UK never ceases to amaze me. I mean, and the way in which non-executive directors serving on remuneration committees aren't smelling the coffee, I just don't get it. But and the United States is just as bad. And what that is leading to is remuneration which is detached from performance, or levels of remuneration detached from performance, are just leading to increasing inequality of wealth. And I think that could lead to unfortunate consequences socially. And it's something that has to be tackled. Hot topic. Legal risk has risen up the scale of corporate risks. The whole board diversity thing. Gender is a major factor. But there is no doubt about it, board behaviour improves the more women join the board. And I know that from my own experience, funny enough, in a charity where I was deputy chair and I chaired the nomination committee. And I had to wield the knife. I removed 6 older male trustees, brought in 4 ladies, all of whom were younger. The average age came down. The speed with which business was transacted improved. Shorter board meetings, I'll drink to that. Made a difference. Now that's one example, but I think there's no doubt about it that I think the presence of women in boardrooms adds beneficially to the decision-making process. You've got the whole responsible capitalism issue, the managing of stakeholders and accountability to wider stakeholders. And that, interestingly, has led to the appointment of a committee now for a code of governance for private companies. I think that's long overdue in the UK. When you think about some of the bigger private companies, and I'm sure you've got them here, if one of those collapses, the impact on the economy and on the government could be significant. And then the whole question of board evaluations. Following the financial crisis, ICSA did some work on boardroom behaviours, the conclusion of which were 4 uncomfortable truths. Well-run companies can make strategic and sometimes catastrophic misjudgments. Risk management not properly overseen, monitored or reviewed by the board. Often it was just left to the audit committee. It's a board responsibility, is oversight of risk. Remuneration and incentivization not aligned with shareholders' interests, and a failure to inform stakeholders, not just shareholders, stakeholders, sufficiently. That work we did identified 3 areas needing attention. Institutional. Are corporate governance policies and architecture fit for purpose? Has management installed adequate processes and systems? And are directors exhibiting appropriate behaviours? So we had there the institutional, the organisational, and the behavioural. Now, we identified in that work that good practice boardroom behaviour was characterised by those 9 features. So clear understanding of the board's role. The board is there to oversee the management of the business. The board is not there to manage the business. And non-executive directors forget it's a case of noses in, fingers out. They smell the state of the business, they don't finger it. Does this business pass the smell test? Once the non-executive directors start interfering in the management of the business, it's very hard to hold an executive to account. You can't. You've syndicated the responsibility and the liability. Appropriate deployment of knowledge, skills, experience and judgment. So what balance of those have you got on the board? Independent thinking. Assumptions and established orthodoxy need to be questioned. Challenge has to be constructive. If people come onto a board full of suspicion or just trying to show off what a tough guy I am, I'll show these executives up for a load of incompetent idiots. If that's the mentality which a non-executive has, they're asking for trouble because it will just lead to tension, in fact conflict on the board. Non-executive directors have to be constructive friends of the management team. Can't overemphasize that. Constructive friends. Yes, and it's knowing how to challenge in a way which doesn't put people's backs up. And it requires a skill, emotional intelligence for a start. Yes, there has to be rigorous debate. The decision-making environment has to be supportive. There needs to be a shared vision. And for the chair, it's vital to close each item of business in a timely way, not let it go round and round and round ad nauseam. That's not the way to do it.
We go to a short break. More when we return. Welcome back to BATV's coverage of the JSE core competencies to excel as a corporate secretary.
We are now going to have a panel discussion, as you will see, and members of the local chapter will be participating, and Mrs. Henry Pottinger is going to be the moderator, and they're going to be talking about things that happen in a very practical way.
How rewarding is your job as a company secretary? Any tips that you can give to budding company secretaries, people who are waiting in the wings to take over your jobs? For me, I enjoy my job. I will not work anywhere else until I retire than with KPMG. As to rewarding, yes, it is rewarding in many respects. I like to see that the people who I work with, they are enabled, they are eloquent, they can answer questions from shareholders, they deal with matters like that with alacrity, and they're very responsive.
It's not glamorous in the sense that if the reward you're looking for is your name in lights, it's clearly the wrong profession for you. So I'm glad that Liz actually said the word enable, because you are an enabler. You're a facilitator. You know, we all understand, certainly after listening to Simon this morning, the importance of corporate governance. Well, all of that falls on your shoulders for you to administer. You pull it together. You keep all the moving pieces going in unison, and you don't, there will be no name in lights, certainly not where I operate for that. So if that's what you, but it can be, obviously it's very rewarding in other ways. Just in terms of tips, I can't stress enough, well, there are two main things I'll say. One is that you have to have a high level of administrative capability, and and obviously you can't do it on your own. So whether it means an internal team or going for external support, you have to be extremely organized, and you have to make sure that you create a lot of systems which allow you to ensure that you comply with all the requirements that you have, which are numerous. Other than that, I can't stress enough the importance of what we keep calling soft skills, but they're not soft at all, because they're critical for the role. Definitely, there's a higher level of judgment and diplomacy and management of relationships of people which is involved. We talked a little bit earlier about the relationship the tension between management and the board, which can sometimes exist. And in that case, your role is critical because you really are the diplomat who has to kind of navigate those two relationships and those two different sets of roles within a company. So that I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that you develop your relationships and that you manage personalities.
I recall some years ago I did a document for my chairman, and I went to him and I'm explaining to him what it is that I'm doing and what it is that he needs. He says to me, "Where I must sign." So it gives you that level of confidence and trust, and to ensure that what you're doing and what you're presenting is correct. And you must build up that whole self-integrity so that, it is not questioned. And I feel that if I have to take something to somebody and they ask me, so where is this or what is that? I do my own self-assessment, because when I do a document, it says where, what, when, why, who, and so forth. So I ask myself those questions so that, you can develop that trust when you're working with somebody.
The job is really very, very interesting. The things that come across your desk are amazing, dynamic, invigorating, challenging. Scope is very, very diverse. Corporate governance has really taken its hold, rather, on Jamaica and within the Caribbean. There is just so much that we have to learn and offer to our clients and to ourselves. Certainly, if someone is looking at this as a profession, I think corporate governance is the way to go. That's just me personally. You'll always assist and help your clients, but there's always a nuance on what has occurred, what should have been done, and how we're going to correct it. And that's what I love about it. And working with PwC and my team, we have just so much to do. You've got to be very structured, lists, and more lists. You have to be very detail-oriented and be able to pick up, and very meticulous, and be able to pick up errors very easily.
In my role as a corporate secretary, the reward for me is I am constantly learning. Every day there is something that I didn't know, or something now that I have to go and know. And it is no 2 days are ever the same. Especially in our company, which we tend to be very entrepreneurial, the ideas come, and as a company secretary and as compliance, I have to research to say, can it be done, can it not be done? Would this be in breach of anything? I would also advise that the regulators are good allies. From where I sit, I call them a lot because I need their guidance. They are more intimate with the laws and regulations and how they interpret what I am asking them to just bounce things off. So I would ask you to use them up. The company's office, the stock exchange, the Bank of Jamaica, the FSC, they're all very open to questions. No one has said no to me yet. Even if they don't know the answer, they'll research it and get back to us. And our real success lies in having a great team behind us, including KPMG.
Thank you.
And our team in Rep, Trinidad and Jamaica that supports me, because we just could not do it alone.
Thanks a lot, ladies. I hope then that those of you in the audience found something informative, instructive, that you can take away from this panel discussion.
Coming up after the break, what companies need to know about the Corporate Governance Index. Welcome back to BATV's coverage of the JSE Core Competencies to Excel as a Corporate Secretary.
So what is this Corporate Governance Index that we have been talking about? And it really is a tool that has been developed to measure how all entities that are listed, at least surely for us listed on the stock exchange, how it conforms to various established corporate governance principles. Now, typically, the index has a numerical value, right, where the extremes of the values are overall good and poor. And also, it assists in improving the transparency and ultimately FDI for countries. Because research has shown that countries and surely listed companies, like using the stock exchanges that have a corporate governance index, especially when there's not very strong regulatory environment for them to operate within, the corporate governance index has actually helped to create greater investment opportunities. And what the research has shown is that countries with the indices have shown significant growth in corporate governance practices. So let's talk a little about the corporate governance index in Jamaica. And the index has been developed by the Jamaica Stock Exchange. As I indicated before, it's the first for the Caribbean region. The process that is being utilized is that it's going to be automatic, so that whether you're listed on the junior market or you're listed on the main market, you are going to be assessed using the index manual. So the purpose of the index, as stated by the Jamaica Stock Exchange, is to first of all periodically measure listed companies' conformance to required corporate governance principles and practices. It also should help to give companies an opportunity to differentiate themselves from other companies, because while all companies are listed and expected to be guided by certain principles and certain rules and certain legislations, you can differentiate yourself by the score that you probably will get based on the fact that you are adhering to a number of these principles. It will also provide a benchmark by which other parties, external parties, locally and internationally now, can gauge companies' adherence to corporate governance practices.
Every year, we have a workshop for the corporate secretary because we realize that they are an integral part of the corporate governance and effectiveness of publicly listed companies, whether it's on the junior exchange or the big board. And we were fortunate in that the head of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of the UK was coming on a visit to Jamaica to meet with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, because we are in the process of representing them in providing training and continuing development for corporate secretaries, persons who want to be corporate secretaries, and as a matter of fact, there is an upcoming fast track that's going to be available for attorneys and chartered accountants who invariably are performing the duties of the chartered secretary, and what it will allow them to do is to have the formal chartered secretary designation. So we felt that this was very important to continue to lift the profile of the chartered secretary and their role in listed companies.
I thought the conference was excellent, actually. The seminar was excellent. It touched on very important aspects that are critical for the development of our businesses within Jamaica and internationally, and for our companies, concentrating on corporate governance and the amendments that have just occurred in the Companies Act and why corporate governance is so important. So I encourage everyone to be at the next seminar.
The governance is here to stay. There's no doubt about that. And it's the proportionate application of governance principles which is so important in all types of organisation. But in order to be able to do that, every organisation needs to be clear about its organisational purpose. Then the board, the directors, need to be clear about the key values by which that purpose is going to be delivered. Only then can you devise a governance framework for your particular type of organisation. Every organisation, however big, however small, needs to do that.
Who does corporate governance benefit again?
Obviously, it benefits the companies themselves, it benefits their shareholders as the owners, or if it's an unincorporated body, the members. But it also benefits wider society. I think that's the important point. Their employees, those with whom they do business, and ultimately it benefits the government. Because if an enterprise fails and is employing people, and it fails because of poor governance practices, the ultimate responsibility financially was going to fall on the government. For example, in social security payouts for unemployed people. I think also if companies fail because of poor governance, it doesn't reflect well on the country. And for a country that is trying to entice inward investment, if the governance framework isn't up to snuff, as we say, then that could have a potentially negative effect. So good governance, it just makes sense. There's plenty of anecdotal evidence too that good governance enhances reputation. It also, for organisations, particularly commercial ones, reduces the cost of capital. It just makes sense.
That's it from us here at the JSE Core Competencies to Excel as a Corporate Secretary. I've been your host, Andrew Laidley, and thanks for tuning in to Business Access TV. Serious about business.